in this computer. All right, Bob, I think you're on.
Well, I wish that we could start this study with some good news. uh, um, when I was reviewing my college education and thinking about tonight's lesson, there's always one phrase that if you didn't know the answer to the question, you would always use for that class. For instance, in economics, supply and demand. If you didn't know anything else, you just wrote down supply and demand, you get some points for being correct. And if you had French, merci beaucoup, thank you very much. If it was for business, you talked about buy low, sell high. Everything was simple down to these phrases. Well, tonight, and for the next couple of lessons, the next couple of weeks, the answer to every question is Jesus Christ. Because we're going to talk about the temple. And what is amazing to me as we go in and talk about the temple, the furnishings to the temple, and to the priestly garments, and some of the things that God instructed Moses on the mountain, these are instructions that were meticulously followed when they constructed the temple, and they come directly from God. And God had a point to make with every detail of these instructions. You could read and almost come up with a diagram and a blueprint to construct the tabernacle today. And some people, if you look at some Bibles, they study Bibles, they have a picture that is basically drawn from the specifications that are in Exodus. I start this lesson with the quote that God was talking to Moses. When Moses finished with the ceremony that the nation of Israel ratified the Ten Commandments as a covenant between God and Israel, a conditional covenant, and then Moses and the elders went up on the mountain and they feasted with the Lord, his glory there. Well, Moses continued to go on up the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain for 40 days. And during this period of time, he was being tutored by God, instructed by God. And one of the things that Moses reported in Exodus is that God told him, Israel, they are to make a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them. You must make it according to all that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle, as well as the pattern of all of its furnishings. Pattern, specification. The word pattern is used frequently throughout this part of the Bible. The other remarkable thing about, as I look at this study, we have a God who wants to dwell with his people. The ultimate plan for God is to be present with his people. The promise of the future is that God is going to come from heaven and bring his holy throne, temple, to Jerusalem. And he's going to dwell with his people again. It started out that way in the Garden of Eden. Man and his sin corrupted it. And we're going through all of this history to get to the end state where God will dwell again with his people. When we look at the tabernacle and the furnishings of the tabernacle, there's a lot of symbolism. And, we're accustomed to symbols. We like symbols. Our flag, our American flag, is full of symbols. It's colors, red, white, and blue. Red for the blood of sacrifice, white for the purity of the cause, blue for the heavenly blessings on our country. The stripes, 13 stripes, each of the colonies, ultimately to become the states. We have the stars that represent each of the states that are part of the Union. And if you look at the history of the flag, as we added states, they added stars to the heavens that were part of this Union. So we're used to symbolism, and it helps us understand that the flag represents the history of our country. This is why people that have served in the military will never kneel to our flag. We'll stand proudly for our flag. Veterans fought and paid part of the price that's represented by the red of sacrifice on our flag. Well, we're going to look at the tabernacle and all the symbolism there. I can't believe how many ways that God illustrated the person, the work, and the glory of Jesus Christ, and just the way that the temple was constructed, what was used for the temple, how the furnishings were applied and used. The tabernacle is Jesus Christ. It is a symbol of everything that Jesus Christ represents in God's plan of redemption. It's going to take a few lessons to do this, because you'll probably never do this again. We go through and we read the temple, and we kind of have a visual picture of what it looks like. And we have a little model that was given to me that if we had the opportunity, we're together, we could build our own temple and courtyard right there, because it's got all the pieces, and we put it together and we can explain it. But we're going to go for, yeah, there you go. You got a picture right there. We're going to go through tonight just an overall view of the temple and some of the symbolism that's reflective of the temple itself. And we're going to talk about how the different parts of the temple and how the temple itself portrays or illustrates Jesus Christ and God's plan of redemption. Now, the main message that I want you to get from tonight's lesson is that the tabernacle, which was built as a temporary domain for God to dwell with Israel in the wilderness, portrays the future person, work, and glory of Jesus Christ as our Redeemer. The outline tonight is fairly straightforward. We're going to have an overview and introduction to the tabernacle. We're going to talk generally how the tabernacle points to Christ. That's the tabernacle as a whole. And then some conclusions and applications. In the next week to come, we're going to talk about the furnishings of the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the brazen laver, which the priests wash themselves, the brazen altar where they sacrifice the animals. We're going to have all these. There's 7 different furnishings we'll talk about. You're going to see that 7 shows up a lot when we talk about the tabernacle. Well, let's talk a little bit about general information and description of the tabernacle and tent. I'm using 2 words here, tabernacle and tent. We're so used to reading the English translations of the Bible, we use these words interchangeably. But in Exodus, and you look at the Hebrew in Exodus, they're really 2 different things. And we're going to explain that. Now, as I started out with, God instructed Moses to build a tabernacle or a dwelling for God. Not that you can put God in a house, but it was so that God's presence could be with his people. Now, we have various terms that we use to identify the tabernacle. These are terms that are used throughout the Old Testament, sometimes in the New Testament. But the Hebrew word for the tabernacle is mishkan. And that's translated as dwelling or abode or resting place. This is where God would display his presence, his Shekinah glory. And this would be among the people. This tabernacle was within the camp of the Israelites. Now, the Hebrew word ohel, that translates tent. And we're going to distinguish these down the road. But Mishkan signifies the dwelling place or abode of Jehovah, the earthly, temporary dwelling place. And Ohel, it should say tent. I have tenant there, but it should say tent, signifies a meeting place for God's people. See the difference? One is a place for God and his presence. The other place is a meeting place for God's people. And so we see as a tabernacle function, people came to the outer court providing animals for sacrifice, and the priests took over from there. making the sacrifice and bringing the blood into the tabernacle or dwelling place itself, and then sprinkling the blood on the altar that was inside the holies, and then ultimately once a year going into the Holy of Holies and sprinkling blood on the mercy seat. Now, the English word tabernacle is derived from the Latin word tabernaculum, and that means tent. And that's where the problem starts in our translations, because the Latin translation for tabernacle became tent. And so what we see in our translations is they're used interchangeably, when if a careful study of the Hebrew, you really need to make a separation. Other names that are used to describe the tabernacle is the sanctuary, tabernacle of the congregation, that would be the tent, that's where the people come. The tent of meeting, that would again be a tent or the place where the people come to God. The tent of the presence, that would be the tabernacle or the mishkah, which would be the place where God dwelt. And the tent of the testimony, well, it should be the tabernacle of the testimony if you really want to be technical, because that is the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was located. And inside the Ark of the Covenant, among other objects, were the Ten Commandments, the second set of stone tablets preserved in the Ark of the Covenant, above which was the mercy seat. So we know that the tabernacle was constructed according to specific instructions that God gave to Moses. When we look at, not only did God give Moses instructions regarding the design, the layout, the specifications, and materials to be used to construct the tabernacle, one of the other things is that he appointed skilled craftsmen in order to do the work of construction. So you have God not only designing it, but through the Holy Spirit calling craftsmen that were able to carry out these instructions under the power of the Holy Spirit. I quote in Exodus 35, verses 30 through 35, the way that God appointed these people. Moses then said to the Israelites, "Look, the Lord has appointed by name Baziel, son of Uri, son of Hur, from the tribe of Judah. He has filled him with God's Spirit, with wisdom, understanding, and ability in every kind of craft to design artistic works in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut gemstones for mounting, to carve wood for work in every kind of artistic craft. He has also given both him and Oholiab, son of Ahisamach, the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with the skill to do all the work of a gem cutter, a designer, an embroiderer in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen, and a weaver. They can do every kind of craft and design artistic designs." It's amazing. God of details. He not only has the specifications, but he calls and fills the spirit of people that are going to make the tabernacle. So Moses, following God's instructions, not only for the design of the tabernacle, he summoned Baziel and Oholiab and every skilled person in whose heart the Lord had placed wisdom, everyone whose heart moved him to come and work and do work on the tabernacle. So we know that this is divinely provided for. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the size and the layout of the tabernacle. The tabernacle was a rectangle. It was 45 feet or 30 cubits long, 15 feet or 10 cubits wide, and 15 feet or 10 cubits high. Now, a cubit is interesting because most of us can recall from previous lessons that a cubit was the distance between the elbow and the finger, but it was of a woman's forearm, which I didn't know. And it's because women were included in the construction of the tabernacle, especially in the weaving part, where the linens and the coverings. Now, the interior of the tabernacle, this rectangle, it was divided into two sections. the Holy of Holies, which was separated from the holy sanctuary. It was separated by a veil that was completely a solid veil that completely enclosed the Holy of Holies. One of the questions that we always asked when we studied this part of Scripture is, how did the priest get through the veil? It was solid. That's a mystery for God to answer. It's not explained in the Bible. And I'm sure, I am told that when the priest went into the Holy of Holies, he had a rope tied around his leg, because if he didn't do things right, he might suffer the consequence of death, and they'd have to pull him out of the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and that was once a year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Now, the holy sanctuary that was in the Holy of Holies was really a cube, 15 feet by 15 feet by 15 feet. And when we studied the temple of Solomon's temple, it was the same cube dimensions. And when we looked at Revelations and the temple that comes down from heaven, it's a cube that's really huge, miles by miles. But anyway, in the Holy of Holies, as I mentioned before, was the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, which are treated in Exodus as two different items, even though the mercy seat was a cover to the Ark of the Covenant. Now, in the sanctuary the sanctuary was 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. The priests that were assigned the duties would go into the holy sanctuary, and in that sanctuary, on their right side, would be the table of showbread with 12 loaves of bread and cups and utensils, and that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And then in their front was an altar of incense, and the altar had horns on it, and it sprinkled the blood of the sacrifice on the altar of incense. The incense was burned twice a day, in the morning and evening, continually burning, but they took the fire from the brazen altar outside, and they had a section where they brought in the fire to light the incense and keep the incense going on the altar that was inside the holy sanctuary. And then on the left side, to their left, was a lampstand, a candelabra. It was a solid gold piece that had 7 branches, and it had oil in there where they kept that. It was lit by the function of the lampstand was, and the candles were to light and give light to the inner side of the holy sanctuary. Well, what lit the Holy of Holies? No lampstand, no light. It was completely enclosed. God's Shekinah glory lit the inside of the Holy of Holies. Now, when we look at this, the positioning of the tabernacle, this rectangle was positioned on the west side of the courtyard, and the length of it went the length of the courtyard, and the entrance to the tabernacle faced east. East, symbolic of when Adam and Eve sinned, they were evicted from the Garden of Eden through the east side. And what blocked their re-entry into the Garden of Eden? Cherubim with their wings blocking their entrance back into the east side. Kind of interesting. They're kicked out of the Garden of Eden and they were kicked out to the east, and the cherubim guarded it. And here we have the entrance to God, the presence of God, from the east. So it's kind of interesting. It ties it in that this is a redemptive plan, that people are they were kicked out from the east, they're going to return from the east, and they go into God's presence, into the tabernacle. We're talking a little bit about the materials used for the construction of the tabernacle. Except for the silver that was collected from all the male Israelites 20 years or older as an atonement offering, all the materials for the construction of the tabernacle came from voluntary offerings. Moses said, we need offerings, we need people to donate, and the blessings came in, and people donated their linen and their goat hair and all the other supplies that were needed. So in Exodus 36, 3 through 7, we get a summary of the materials that were used for the temple. Craftsmen, took from Moses' presence all the contributions that the Israelites had brought for the task of making the sanctuary. Meanwhile, the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. Then all the craftsmen who were doing all the work for the sanctuary came one by one from the work they were doing and said to Moses, "The people are bringing more than is needed for the construction of the work the Lord commanded Moses to be done." So Moses gave an order. He sent a proclamation throughout the camp. "Let no man or woman make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary." Have you ever had a church where they had to tell people, "Stop giving. Just you've given too much. We can't deal with all the blessings that you're giving us." So the people stopped. The materials were sufficient for them to do all the work. There was more than enough. And I think that speaks well of the people of Israel, that God gave the specifications, the material list, and the people voluntarily gave what was needed, except for the silver atonement offering. Now, when we go through the items, and we'll talk about these a little bit, Exodus 38, 21 through 31, this is the inventory for the tabernacle of the testimony. See a different name for the tabernacle, that was recorded at Moses' command. It was the work of the Levites under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Ur, of the tribe of Judah, made everything that the Lord commanded Moses. With him was Oholiab, son of Asaramach, the tribe of Dan, a gem cunner, a designer, an embroiderer with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen. All the gold of the presentation offering, the voluntary offering, that was used for the project in all the work of the sanctuary was 2,193 pounds, according to the sanctuary shekel. The silver from those of the community who are registered was 7,544 pounds, according to the sanctuary shekel, 2/3 of an ounce per man. That's the atonement offering. That's the amount that each man was required to bring for atonement. Half a shekel, according to the sanctuary shekel, from everyone 20 years old or more would cross over to the registered group. 550,000 men made that offering for the silver. There were 7,500 pounds of silver used to cast the bases of the sanctuary and the bases of the veil, 100 bases from 7,500 pounds, 75 pounds for each base. With the remaining 44 pounds, he made the hooks for the posts, overlaid their tops, and supplied bands for them. So it tells you not only the volume, but what they were used for. The bronze presentation offering totaled 5,310 pounds. He made it with the bases for the entrance to the tent of the meeting, the bronze altar, the bronze grate, all the utensils for the altar, the bases for the surrounding courtyard, the bases for the gate of the courtyard, all the tent pegs for the tabernacle, and all the tent pegs for the surrounding courtyard. Now, that's a lot of information. Let's get some significance out of it. When we talk about gold, we're talking about 1.25 tons, 2,193 pounds, or 35,088 ounces, which based upon, and this is current as today, today's gold market comes to $63 million of gold. When you talk as the most precious of the metals, gold was represented, it represents God's divine glory. So there's symbolism in the gold. It's God's glory, the radiance of gold. The gold was used to overlay the 48 boards used to frame the tabernacle. The tabernacle was, they had hardwood boards and they inlaid it all with gold. So on the inside and outside of the frame to the tabernacle, it was gold. And it just showed the brilliance and glory of God. It overlaid the Ark of the Covenant. It overlaid the poles that held the boards together, the pillars for the tabernacle, the mercy seat on top of the ark, where the cherubim were solid gold, and the lampstand, all were made of gold. Now let's talk about the silver. Silver was approximately 4.25 tons, or 7,544 pounds, or 120,704 ounces, which based upon today's market value was over $2,200,000 in value. We're at $65 million. As the second most precious metal, silver represented the redemption of those called by God. That's the redeemed are precious to God, represented by the silver in the temple, in the tabernacle. It was used to make the 96 sockets or bases, which became the foundation for the boards. What you had is a board surrounded by gold, sitting on two bases of silver, 75 pounds each. Let me tell you, this thing was solid. They could have a hurricane gale and this tabernacle would not blow off. Now, the next thing was the bronze. Some people believe it was copper that was used. That was 5,310 pounds, which was used to make the brazen altar and the laver, the wash basin in the courtyard. The bronze signified Christ enduring the wrath of God's judgment. No wonder it was used for the altar, the brazen altar where the burnt sacrifices were made, because Christ suffered. He bore God's judgment, the wrath. And so the outer, and Christ also, out of the suffering, the laver, which was the basin that the priest washed everything, well, that was made out of bronze as well. The entrance to the tabernacle, instead of silver under the 5 poles that were to the entrance, they were made out of brass. And we'll get to the significance of that. Then we have the shittim wood, or the acacia wood. This was a very hard wood that was naturally found in the desert, in the wilderness. And it was used to make the frame that was encased in gold for the tabernacle, the ark or the box that was again encased in gold, the pillars and poles, all of which were overlaid. So they used this very hard substance, wood, and then they encased it in gold. And the wood represented the incorruptibility of Jesus in his human form. The wood was so hard, it never became corrupted, it never rotted. Jesus in his life never succumbed to sin or temptation. Then we get to the goat hair. This was used to make the second covering over the linen ceiling. There were 4 coverings to the tabernacle. The first covering was linen, and it was embroidered with cherubim. And the linen was as white as pure snow. And so if you walked inside the tabernacle, you would see this linen ceiling with these cherubim on top in the colors of blue, purple, and scarlet. And then in front of you, you would see the veil made out of linen with cherubim. Isn't it interesting that the pathway to God goes through cherubim? Cherubim blocked the entry to the Garden of Eden. Now, when we talk about goat hair, well, why goat hair? For every sin offering, as when we get to this part of Exodus and Leviticus, when we talk about sin offerings were the blood of the goat. You had the goat sacrifice for sin, you had bull sacrifice for other reasons, but you all, with the exception of one sacrifice where the goat wasn't slaughtered, and that was called the scapegoat, where they put their hand on the goat, symbolically transferring sin to that goat, and then running them out of the camp with the sin in them. And so they called him the scapegoat. The goat hair then was the second. Above this cherubim linen, which is the ceiling of the tabernacle, the second layer was goat hair. And the goat hair represented what was slaughtered for the sacrifice, or the sacrifice of Christ for redemption of sin. So the linen covered by goats, which were the goats to sacrifice. The next covering over the tabernacle was a ram skin. And it was this third covering, it was over the goat hair. So you had the linen, then you had the goat hair, and then you had the ram skin. Well, what is the ram? The ram really was the leader of the sheep, the male leader. And you had the separation where the ram is what, if you remember when Isaac was taken on the mountain by his father to be sacrificed. What was found in the briar as a substitute sacrifice? The ram. And what did they do for the tabernacle? They dyed the ram skin red, scarlet red, symbolic of the sacrifice of our Lord, the suffering and sacrifice. And then on the outside, the last layer were, some say it's badger skin, some say it's a sea mammal skin. This outer covering was not attractive. It was as plain as you could get. It would be the kind of blanket you'd throw on when company's coming over. It's just, you just don't want to spoil anything but it was very protective of what was underneath. It was waterproof because it was a very thick skin, and it was plain, representing the humility of the Lord coming in human form. And if you went and looked, if you went out and you visited the Israeli camp and you went to the center of the camp and you went to the tabernacle and you see this big, huge fenced in area with white linen. And if you got permission to go into the courtyard and you look at this tabernacle, 15 feet high, 15 feet wide, 45 feet long, all covered with badgers, brown, plain, you'd say, you know what? My tour guide misled me. This is not something I want to look at. I'm wasting my time. It's only when you go on the inside do you see the glory and the valuable, precious things. Now let's talk a little bit about the colors. They're always blue, purple, and scarlet. Now, if you have ever put blue and scarlet right together, they don't go together very well. Purple is a mix of blue and scarlet. And every time in scripture where you see these colors, especially with the reference to the tabernacle, blue, purple, and scarlet are listed in that order. Blue signifies the heaven from which our Lord came. Purple represents the royalty of our Lord Jesus Christ. And scarlet signifies the suffering and sacrifice as Christ as a human being on earth. So there's symbology there, just like our flag. Now, this is the interesting thing. In Exodus, there are two ways that the tabernacle is described. The first way is when Moses is repeating the instructions which God gave him on the mountain. And the order starts with the inside of the tabernacle and works its way outside to the courtyard. That signifies God's grace coming from heaven, reaching out to mankind. Now, at the end of Exodus, when they talk about assembling and putting the tabernacle together after all the parts are made, it's done in an inverse order. They start with the outside and end up with the inside, representing man in sin coming before the throne of God for God's grace and mercy. It's interesting, just the order. Nothing in this scripture is by accident. When we talk about this order, it's duplicated in the book of Romans and Ephesians. If you look at the book of Romans, how does it start? It starts with the depravity of man. It concludes with an initial conclusion of, that all men are sinful. And then it goes to God's grace and redemption. If you look at the book of Ephesians, it starts out with the glory of God, and then it goes to sin. This parallels in the New Testament what God is doing with the Old Testament, describing the tabernacle. We talk about, I'm hoping I'm impressing on you that there's not one single detail in Exodus and the description of the tabernacle that doesn't have a reference to what's the answer? Jesus Christ. It's the answer for all of it. But how it does it is just a miraculous way. Now we're going to talk about what I started with, is that the difference between the tabernacle and the tent. Now, we blur those in our translation, English translations, what they are, but the term tabernacle specifically in Exodus refers to that linen covering that covers the top of the tabernacle and the gold inlaid walls on the sides. That's the tabernacle. That's God's dwelling place. The rest of it is a tent that covers it. And so that's the distinction. And it's an important one because the glory of God is in the tabernacle. It's not in the coverings. Now, when we talk about how the tabernacle points to Christ, I really marvel at how God uses a visual object and all the objects of the tabernacle to illustrate his dwelling place. Well, it really, if you read Ezekiel and Revelations, the tabernacle on earth resembles God's heavenly throne and the orientation of that. It represents the meeting place between God and man, and it points towards Christ. So the key to understanding any part of the tabernacle is seeing how it connects to our Lord Jesus Christ. And we have that in scriptures in the New Testament where in John 1:14, the Word became flesh and took up residence, tabernacled among us. The tabernacle was God's presence in the Old Testament. Jesus is God's tabernacle in the New Testament. Now, there are parallels between the tabernacle and Christ. The tabernacle was designed as a temporary dwelling place of the Lord. It was designed to be moved about in the wilderness. After Israel went into the promised land, the tabernacle was placed at Shiloh, and it was rarely moved from that location. And then later on, it was moved from time to time. But it was essentially built to be a temporary abode. What was the permanent abode? It was going to be the temple that Solomon built. So Jesus was temporarily on the earth in human form. When he comes back, he's on earth permanently. There's a parallel there. The tabernacle's outer appearance was humble, while the inside was rich, lavish, and beautiful. Jesus as a man was humble. And yet, he appeared without his godly or his divine glory. When he returns, he's going to be displaying his full glory. The tabernacle originally was placed in the center of the Israelite camp. Jesus is the center of Israel's redemption. The Holy of Holies contained the Ark of the Covenant where the law, the Ten Commandments, was preserved. Jesus preserved the Ten Commandments in his heart. The tabernacle was a place where the sacrifices for atonement were made and where blood was sprinkled on the altar in the holy section of the tabernacle, and once a year it was sprinkled on the mercy seat inside the Holy of Holies. Jesus is the sacrifice. The tabernacle was a place to worship. Jesus is the person we worship. There was only one entrance door to the tabernacle, which was on the east side. Access to the entrance was through the tribe of Judah. Later in Numbers, we're going to get the layout of the tribes as they camped, and Judah was always placed on the east side. The pathway to get to the tabernacle was through the tribe of Judah. The pathway to Christ through the tribe of Judah. And when we look at it, there's only one entrance. Jesus is the only way for redemption and salvation. Now let's look at the temple contrasted to the tabernacle. The tabernacle was constructed first, the temple followed. Jesus came in human form first, and then will come in his glorified form. So it could literally, the tabernacle represents the first advent of Christ, and the temple, the second advent, the second time he comes. Historically, the relatively humble tabernacle appeared first, while the glorious temple appeared later. Solomon's temple was just absolutely, it could have been one of the wonders of the world. It was so lavish. Christ appeared in human form, will appear in glory. The tabernacle was a temporary structure. The temple was a more permanent. Christ in human form was temporary. In his glorified form, permanent. The tabernacle was erected by Moses as a prophet. The temple was erected by Solomon as a king. Jesus came in human form as a prophet. He will return as a reigning king. The tabernacle was used in the wilderness while the temple was built in Jerusalem. The number 5 that represents, there's symbology to the numbers, but the number 5 that's used throughout, and next week we're going to get into this a lot, it's used a lot with the tabernacle. 5 represents grace. In the temple, the number 12 is used frequently. Well, 12 represents government. The apostles are going to assume the governing authority in the kingdom of heaven. Now, the outer appearance of the tabernacle was rudimentary and without glory, while the temple was luxurious. You could go on. I had to weed this down with all the parallels and things, but you'll go through now, and if you read Exodus and you read about the tabernacle, you're going to say, wow, all this information is in here contained. The conclusions and applications. When we first started studying the books of Exodus, I told you it was a book of illustrations. In fact, I called it Redemption Illustrated. And here we get to the high point of Exodus of God's plan of redemption, illustrated, visibly illustrated by the tabernacle. It's a visible representation of the person, work, and glory of Jesus Christ in carrying out God's redemptive plan. Because God provided the design, layout, specifications, each detail has significance as it relates to Jesus Christ. Now, as we move forward to look at each component parts of the tabernacle, the tent, the furnishings for the tabernacle, and for the courtyard, you're going to see that the illustrations that point towards Jesus Christ become even more clear. We have just touched the tip of the iceberg with it when it comes to this. God, in his wisdom, used visible objects to teach us spiritual lessons, spiritual truths. And the tabernacle is an example of that. It foreshadowed the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ in God's redemptive plan. Now, you can go too far with this. Some biblical scholars, when I went through and did all the research, they would start to do a diagram, and pretty soon they were trying to make the tabernacle into a physical shape of Jesus Christ. Well, I don't think we have to go that far, but it suffices to say there's enough symbolism to keep us interested in what we're studying in this lesson. So I hope that you're blessed with the introduction to the tabernacle, all the symbology that comes with it. Next week, we're going to get into the different parts and more detail of what the goat hair is and what the pillars represent and how it was all put together. And we'll get into the furnishings, the 7 furnishings of the temple or the tabernacle. So we'll continue with the symbolism, but I hope that you'll be as blessed as I am in the revelation of God as to his redemptive plan through Jesus Christ.